I have been thinking a lot about classics and how to talk about them and so forth. And in the process of doing that, I've discovered a lot of people have, let's say, extremely detailed questions. Um, and I just want to make a point that's real important, I think, with Taijiquan. Um, Taijiquan, it contains, the process of learning it contains all of these picky things. In fact, Taiji's famous for this. Taiji's famous for teachers coming up and saying, no, your little finger has to be a little bit more this way than that way, or, you have, and yet at the same time, these extremely picky corrections are also backed up against situations where the student will say, well, he does it this way and I do it that way. Which one of us is right? And the teacher will go, doesn't matter. So in other words, you have a bunch of things that don't matter kind of mixed up with a bunch of things that really do matter. And and the things that don't matter are in a way just as important as the things that do, because the things that don't matter are your freedom. They are your ability to express something besides the spirit of perfection. In a way, perfection is the enemy of Taijiquan, because perfection, by definition, defines a situation in which you don't have to change, in which, in fact, you shouldn't change, because if you're perfect, why change? So we don't want perfection, actually, because we want change. That's what we're seeking. We're not seeking some static thing. You can even think of this in a very literal way in terms of what we deal with in terms of balance. There's two definitions of balance. One is a perfect balance in a static sense. Right now, I'm perfectly balanced, some people might say. But I have no change. This kind of balance produces no change. This is a perfect balance. What we want is to seek this perfect balance, but we want to seek it in the midst of change. And so we have to have change taking place at the same time. So all of the classics and everything have to be looked at from that point of view. A lot of the protocol that we learn, you understand, if we were perfect at it, it would destroy Taijiquan. I'm most fond of mentioning the two fantasy ideals of Taijiquan, what I call the mountain and the ghost. The ghost is the guy who has perfect neutralization. You can't touch him, it doesn't matter. You'll see a lot of Taiji masters have made a lot of reputation on this, and they, just have movies of themselves with students trying to touch them, and they can sort of wiggle around everywhere and neutralize everything. And yes, that's a kind of ideal. But if you had that ideal, there would be no Taijiquan. There would be nothing else. You just do that. Why do anything else? Or the mountain, in which you're so powerful, you just root everything and, reflect it, and everybody just bounces off of you like they're running into a rubber wall or something. This is another fantasy which would destroy Taijiquan, because it also produces no change. In other words, you've reached a state of perfection in either case. So we don't want perfection. We want change. Now, in terms of protocol, for instance, there are empty steps, okay? The protocol we practice is this whole thing of keeping the weight completely 100% while they step, and then, all this stuff about what makes empty steps. But we don't expect our steps to actually follow that protocol. And if they did, let's just say, it would be a very weird way of fighting. So in other words, what we want is to develop a condition. The condition in this case is the complete segregation of substantial and insubstantial in the legs. And we want that condition to continue even when the protocol is broken. And instead of having the luxury of stepping like this and then moving ourselves, then we are just finding ourselves coming forward onto this leg. As we do this, all the time that we are rooted to this leg, no matter what our condition our body is in, no matter how dynamic it is and flying through space, as long as we have this root is controlling us, and this is substantial, and this other leg is completely empty. And so it remains empty. That's why it can follow certain rules that can keep Li from appearing in it, just like the arms can. They can move around, they can do things. but they can't, other things they can't do. And one of them is, in this case, that you're stepping, so you don't suddenly reach out with your leg this way. The step must follow the change of the body, and the change of the body is completely dictated by the substantial leg, and the substantial leg is completely locked into its root. So you have that connection, and that's what you're practicing, not breaking. The practice of yielding, okay? Now, yielding is defined in the classics as I'm soft when the opponent is hard, and it's very important. But most people, when they think of yielding, they don't think of that. They think of not letting anyone touch them. They think of the classic that says, a feather cannot be placed, a fly cannot alight. And so nothing can touch you. But realize that is not true yielding. That is perhaps extremely clever escape. You can even escape and keep all your Taijis together and say, okay, well, I'm still doing Taijiquan. I have perfect Taijis, I have perfect neutralization, but he can't touch me at all. But yet, if that actually happened, you would defeat one of the most important elements of Taijiquan, which is this element of waves of change going through the body that are connected to the opponent. Now, you can make waves of change go through yourself just by practicing Chan Tzu Jing. You can do it in a form. You can make, you can create all kinds of far-out Jing. But the trick that makes Taijiquan really work, in terms of the Yang style especially, is your ability to regulate those changes according to what your opponent is doing. In other words, according to listening. And the first time you run into this in a critical way is when you do three-step hand pushing. This is why I like three-step hand pushing. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you understood that, like I said, we're not looking for perfection. And we don't, in our protocols, like I say, sometimes they seem like they really strive for a certain kind of perfect behavior. But that behavior is only to clue us into the right condition. And what we want when we actually, in other words, Taijiquan does not respond to a scientific kind of approach to it when you're actually doing it. It's an art. And the thing about art is it allows you to enter into the process. You are not just in other words, it allows your personality. It allows everything about you to enter in. You are not just a mechanism for expressing a certain perfect algorithm. So it's certain steps forward and does this, and you always do this. You can program that into a computer, but that's not what you want to be. You don't want to be this perfect computer program. You want to be a human being, and you want to experience, like I say, the art of boxing and not merely the science of it. So anyway, so I just want to say, don't, if I seem a little frustrated sometimes when people get extremely excessive about, exactly what all the yin and yang changes and all this other stuff is, remember, that's not as important as grasping the whole concept of it. So when we function in Taijiquan, we want the body to constantly have these internal changes. I said, if we can hook those internal changes up in some responsive way to our opponent, then we're doing very clever boxing. But that doesn't eliminate yourself. In other words, you want yourself to enter into the equation. And that's why one of the greatest classics says, fundamentally, giving up the self, fundamentally, Taijiquan is giving up the self to father others. But sometimes people give up the near to seek the far. It also says that you have to, it said, well, one of my favorites is, the whole body relies on spirit, not on qi. Qi, even the function of qi, I've known people who are really into qigong, and they're like, oh, meridians, they go this way and that way, and everything is doing this. Avoid such a technical, feeling towards your body. You want the qi to flow in the body, but you don't make it flow by becoming more and more and more and more technical about it. You make it flow by integrating all of these other factors of Taijiquan